That song. All right. Good evening. Thank you all so much for being here with us. Those who are with us in person, I thank you. And I thank those of you at home. We always have some folks joining us live at this time. And then we're going to have some others of you that will be joining us later on. Some tonight, some tomorrow. But anyway, thank you for being a part of our service, our Bible study, I should say. Let's go to Genesis chapter 19. And we're going to pick up again with verses 1 through 11. So join me in Genesis 19, 1 through 11, as we open up our time now with a word of prayer. Gracious, loving Heavenly Father, we come to you now to just welcome ourselves into your presence. To come before you, dear God, as we study your living, life-giving word. This isn't just any story, dear God, that is found in your great book of Genesis. This one has a lot to it, dear God, and I just pray that you will just open us up to you, dear God, and to your Spirit as we go into this story and learn this message. And dear God, just grow in our faith with you and in our relationship with you. So bless us now, dear God, through this time of reading and this time of study. You lead us and you guide us now. And we ask all this in your holy, mighty, and very precious name. Amen. All right, join with me. Let's go again at verse 1. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. He said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night. Wash your feet. Then you can rise early and go on your way." They said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, so that we may know them." Lot went out of the door to the men, shut the door after him, and said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." But they replied, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came here as an alien, and he would play the judge? Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near the door to break it down. But the men inside reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the door of the house, both small and great, so that they were unable to find the door. All right, so you remember last week we looked at, or we finished up, I should say, with the first 3 verses. The first part of chapter 19. And the angels have come. Lot doesn't know they're angels, but he knows there's something special about them. He immediately asked them to come stay with him, and they refuse. As we read, they're going to stay in the city square. But he begs them, "Come stay with me," because, and we've talked about 2 reasons. First off, he knows what kind of city Sodom is. He knows the danger. Secondly, so that not only he can protect them, but he can then do what? Get them out of the city. Get up early and be out of the city before anybody even knows you were here or that you were gone. And what we ended up talking about was basically the fact that Lot not only knows about how the city is, in his own way he's accepting the lifestyle of the city and the ways of the people, okay? And the sad part is that accepting acts of sin within the lives of others can still have an effect on you as a person. So now let's pick up with verses 4 and 5, okay? Now, as we read, before they can get to sleep, what happens? Yes, we read there, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house. So basically this means what? Who showed up that day? That night, I should say. Who showed up to surround the house?
All of the men of Sodom.
All the men. All the men. Notice it says at the end there of what I read tonight, 5 to into verse 11, both small and great, no matter what walk of life, every man that had to do with anything with Sodom is surrounding that house at that time. Now, as we see there in verse 5, the demand of all the men of the city is what? To not just bring them out, but bring these two men out so that they can what?
Solve them, I guess.
Well, okay, what does it say there?
Have relations.
Or how can, does yours say have relations? All right, mine says so that they may know them, okay? Now, whether it's relations or so that we may know them, I want you to understand this concerning this statement, this demand, okay? Never ever let anyone try and convince you that this means that the men only wanted to know these two men, these two strangers, in a social way. There are people that will tell you that. There are people that say, oh, they didn't mean anything bad by this. They were trying to get to know them just in a social way. This was not about getting together to share a meal or find out what things they shared in common with these two strangers. Hey, you like to hunt and fish? I like to hunt and fish. Maybe we can go together sometime. It was not about, hey, I got a pretty good handicap with my golf game. How about you? What's your handicap? Trust me, this had nothing to do with finding out who likes to bowl, who likes to sew, or who likes to cook. Okay? Don't ever let anybody tell you anything different. When they demand so that we may know them, it is a direct reference to that old saying of being with somebody in a biblical way. Okay, that's what this is about. This was about, or just put it plain and simple, in a biblical way, or this is about the men of the city wanting to know these men in an unnatural sexual way. Okay? But when you really take the time to stop and just look at this closely, you discover that it's actually worse than just knowing them in an unnatural sexual way. In reality, what we're talking about is what? What are these men proposing to do? They're going to do what to these two strangers? We're talking about what?
Probably kill it.
Well, or basically gang rape. That's what this is about.
My mom was carnally.
Carnally, well, it's carnally, and that's what it's about. This is about gang rape. And no matter, in situations like that, whatever happens, happens. You see, this is about these men seeking to fill their self-gratifying, lust-filled desires with an unnatural act that goes against the designs of God. But you can also say it like this, that this is a sin-based desire that has covered all the men of the city. But worse, it shows us exactly what? It shows us what concerning sin? That what sin is what? What sin is capable of doing. And the effect it can have on people. Not just a person, but upon people. So this is nothing social cause or anything like that. This is an unnatural act of sex in which they were going to commit gang rape upon these two strangers. It was all about them and their own desires. Self-gratifying, lust-filled desires, okay? So they are there, and this is what they are demanding. But now look at verse 6. Now, we read there in verse 6 that Lot steps outside his house, and with great courage does what?
Tells them that he has.
Okay, but he does something else first that even shows a greater courage.
Shut the door behind
He shuts the door behind him. Why? Because he's still seeking to protect the people inside. A great sign of courage, he shuts that door to the house behind him, okay? And with going outside, Lot now seeks to change the evil thoughts, the evil intentions of the men of the city by offering to the men an alternate solution to the situation, which was what? To offer his what?
2 daughters.
His 2 daughters. But not just any 2 daughters. What was it that made his 2 daughters so special?
They were virgins.
They're virgins. He offers his 2 daughters, but he makes sure to let them know that they are virgins. Maybe he's hoping this will be the selling point. That this point will make the deal too good for these men to pass up, to give not just his daughters, but to give his virgin daughters. Now, first off, let's be honest here. You see, at this point, if you're like me, you read this, and first off, your hair stands on end when you think about this. I want to get sick at my stomach when I think about not just Lot, what he does here, but when I question his actions to offer his virgin daughters in place of these 2 men. But the truth is, Lot is actually upholding the cultural requirements of hospitality back at that time. This was the culture. This was the hospitality. You see, inviting them to his home, he was now not only responsible for feeding them, providing them shelter for the night, but according to the culture of that time, it's also his sacred duty to protect them, to keep them safe, and apparently no matter the what. The cost. No matter what the cost is, it is his job to keep these 2 men safe that are there in his home, okay? But let's go a little bit deeper into this. Because even though this can offer Lot an excuse for doing what he does, is this really what's going on with Lot? Is this really what's going on in his head? See, what we have here really is, what we have here with Lot is the choice. He has to make a choice over cultural obligations going up against his obligation for who?
For the 2 men.
For those 2 men and his 2 daughters or his family. So it's not just a cultural obligation. What we have here is a moral, proper obligation that he also is supposed to have toward his family. It's also his job to protect the family, to watch over his children, his daughters, his wife, and everything. So we have cultural obligation going up against a moral or proper obligation to his family. Now, there are 2 things that both Lot says or Lot does that show just how far Lot has now moved away from any kind of moral obligation that he is supposed to have. Now look at verse 8. In the first part of verse 8, okay, just first part of verse 8, how does Lot offer his daughters to the men of the city? I mean, did you notice that he offers his daughters without any what?
Any reservation.
Reservation or remorse. But look at it also. Look at that first part again. He also does it without any what? Hesitation. Did you notice that he doesn't even offer another alternative first? He doesn't offer them money. He doesn't offer them food. He doesn't offer to go and buy them prostitutes or something like that. Without hesitation, he goes and immediately gives his daughters away. And he does it with no remorse whatsoever. You see, to offer his daughters so quickly in this way, more than likely then, is an indication of what concerning Lot then? That the simple environment that he's living in has done what?
Corrupted.
Has corrupted him, or has at least had an influence. The city hasn't influenced him more than what? More than he realizes. Which then goes back to what can happen to a person who accepts the sinful life that others choose to live. Remember, we talked about this concerning Lot and the city. You see, as a result of the environment that he chooses to live in, Lot ends up sacrificing his moral responsibility to his daughters by offering them in place of his guests. And he does it with no hesitation, and there is no remorse. There is nothing here, okay? But then there's the second thing. The second part of what he does. Also look there in verse 8. Now, what part of verse 8 shows just how far Lot has gone past any kind of moral obligation that he has as a father? What does he tell these men about his daughters? Do whatever you want to them. I know. Do to them as you please. So they could kill them. They could kill his daughters as far as he is concerned. Do whatever you please. The thing is, what I'm trying to point out is, so many times we want to look at Lot as a savior type thing in this. Lot is not. Lot is not the guy we really need to be looking up to within all of this.
Well, he may have thought that they're going to turn him down because they're after these two strangers. They've seen Lot's daughters around town.
Well, okay, that is a possibility. He might have been thinking, well, they're going to say no. But the bottom line is, I wouldn't take a chance. Huh? Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Lot knew that God sent those two men. Why did he, I realize this is, why did he have the discernment to know that God was going to solve that problem?
Well, see, at the time, we don't think he knows who they are. They haven't revealed themselves really to him yet. So, at this point, like I said, we still think he doesn't know exactly. And that's one thing I thought about, too, as well. And I started to mention that, but the more I thought about it, the more I kept thinking, maybe he doesn't know they're angels. He just still sees them as two men that are his responsibility. Because my thought was the same thing. Well, if he knows they're angels, then he knows that God, they have power to protect them. But apparently he doesn't know that. And whether they accept it or not, he still does this without any remorse or without any hesitation here. So, huh? Did he talk to Mrs. Lot about it? The thing is, let's believe that's going on in Lot's mind then is actually this. He is proposing to give to the men of the city then a lesser evil so he can prevent a what? He's going to give them a lesser evil to prevent a what? A greater evil. Yeah. Well, see, so he's proposing to give the men a lesser evil so as to prevent a greater evil. Basically, what Lot is reasoning at this point is that it's better to satisfy their uncontrollable sexual desires through a natural act of sex than through an unnatural act of sex. Or in other words, for Lot, it'd be better for the men of the city to commit an act of heterosexual gang rape than homosexual gang rape. But the bottom line is no matter how you look at it, it is still what? Sin. It's wrong, it's sinful in the eyes of God. But most importantly, we are now learning at this point what? Why God has to now do what?
Destroy the city.
Destroy the city. Okay? Our eyes are now completely open. And we've come to realize that, hey, Lot is not the hero in this story that we have been taught so many times throughout our life and everything. So basically it's believed he's offering a lesser evil to prevent a greater evil. Either way, this is wrong in the eyes of God, okay? Now pick it up in verses 9, 10, and 11 with me. Now as we see, the men of the city, they don't like this compromise suggested by Lot. And their response is what? First off, who are you to what? Who are you to judge us? And now we're going to do what? There in verse 9.
We let
can imagine what that would have been. After what they're planning, what worse could they do to Lot then? The thing is, though, the two angels see what's about to happen. To not just Lot, but to all of them. And so they reach out, as we see, they quickly pull Lot back inside the house. Now in verse 11, here in the New Revised Standard, it reads this. And they struck with blindness. This verse 11. They struck with blindness the men who were at the door of the house, so that they were unable to find the door. Now, we do not know exactly what the angels did at this point. See, this was what I was thinking about at the point is, they can do this, they could have protected Lot, didn't even have to do this. So apparently he doesn't know they're angels, okay? But we don't know exactly what the angels did at this point. They could have produced a bright light that caused immediate blindness. And we do not know if the blindness was temporary or permanent. And the reason why we don't know is why. There were no survivors. Nobody to finish telling the story. But there is one explanation for what might have happened. And it can be found in the Hebrew word that is used here in the verse for blindness. Now, the specific word for blindness, this word is only used 2 times. In this verse, and again in 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 18. Now, in the translation, that word for blindness, it does not mean to become blind or to lack having vision. What the word actually translated to mean is this. It says, to have a dazzled state of mind. Have a dazzled state of mind. What they believe that this means is this, that these men have become so dumbfounded in their minds that they cannot find the door of the house because they no longer know what a door is. That if they become dumbfounded at this point. And the thing is, if you think about it, would that not provide a better means of safety and eventual escape for Lot and his family? I mean, think about it. You know, even a person who has been suddenly struck blind is still smart enough and capable enough to still find a door and push against it. I know the door was right here in front of me. I can't see it anymore, but the door is right here. And the thing is, in their state of sin-driven lust, I don't think that becoming blind would have stopped them. I still think they would have found some way to overpower and come in. But suddenly, coming into a state of mind when you lose the ability to do something or figure out something, wouldn't that be safer? Did somebody say, where did they go? Well, I think they went to the door. What's the door? This could end up providing them actually safety in a greater way, to just be more than just blind, but to actually cause their minds to become dumbfounded, to a point where they can't even reason how to reach out and grab it. So, probably more of a mental thing than a physical thing. But so it wasn't an eye blindness, it's more of a mental blindness that comes upon these men that are seeking to do this great sin against Lot, these 2 men, and most likely they're going to do it to his daughters anyway. This was a true act of sin, and God stopped it to protect, even though Lot went about it in the wrong way. Once again, he should have still done what? Trusted God. The last thing, the first thing he's supposed to do is the last thing that he does, okay? So, now, join me here. Pick up with verse 12 with me. And look at the first part here. It says, there in verse 12, then the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place. For we are going to destroy this place, because the outcry against his people has become great before the Lord. And the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But it seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or else you will be consumed in the punishment of the city. But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and left him outside the city. When they brought them outside, they said, "Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, or else you will be consumed." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords. Your servant has found favor with you, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot flee to the hills, for fear the disaster will overtake me and I die. Look, that city is near enough to flee to, and it's a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved." Okay, let's stop here. So as we see very quickly, the time of judgment has now come. The outcry against the city and all its people has now become too great for God to now ignore. Okay? And the 2 angels are now going to do what they were sent there to do. And because of the destruction that's coming, the 2 angels, they ask Lot, "Do you have anybody else here in the city with a connection to you that needs to be warned so they can get out?" Well, then we pick up in verse 14. Now, as we read, Lot goes and finds his who? In verse 14, he finds who? It says his sons-in-law.
But they're not married yet.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. That's what, in the New Revised, it says his sons-in-law. I always thought it was son-in-laws, but it says here sons-in-law, to warn them about the judgment that's coming. Now, when a person reads this part of the story, the first thing they want to ask is, how can Lot have 2 sons-in-law if his daughters are still virgins, okay? Along with, how can he have sons-in-law when it says who were to marry his daughters? Now, once again, this is just a quick reminder. You know what this is about. But if somebody was to question you, I want you to have the answer, okay? Because as you know what this means, that the 2 men were not legally married to his daughters at the time. They were betrothed. This is a betrothal to his daughters. The New International Version has pledged to marry. If you've got the NIV, it says pledged to marry. And we know, even from the story of Joseph and Mary, we know that this betrothal, it would last an entire year. But more importantly, it was the same as though they were already married. All the requirements of marriage, they're already in place for this year. That is, except for one thing, for the getting to know each other in the biblical sense part. That is still not part of the deal with this, okay? So that's why he can call them his sons-in-law. Because technically they are, even though they're not legally married. But as we see, the reaction of the 2 sons-in-law, that they think he's what? Joking. He's lost his mind. Now, what would you say? Why this belief is going on concerning these 2 future sons-in-law? Why they choose not to believe Lot, okay? There's 2 possibilities. First off, they believe that Lot is trying to stop their betrothal of the marriage to his daughters, and he's trying to stop it somehow. But what might be the other reason why? Why might they be angry with Lot and choose not to believe him? We lied to him before, but what just happened?
They have been part of the men.
Oh, well, they could have been part of the men. I hadn't thought about that.
But he was willing to give his daughters that had not known the man to the mob.
And would that might make you what?
That made me a little upset.
A little upset with my future father-in-law.
If I was going to marry him.
Yeah, why do I want to marry into that family? If they're crazy enough to do something like that. That's the bottom line is that they believe that more likely they're angry. They're angry at the fact how Lot so willingly offered their soon-to-be wives to be gang raped by the men of the city. But
Did the mothers not have anything to say?
really not. Remember, they're more property than anything else. Same way with the daughters. So see, notice if he had had a son, we don't know don't think he had any sons. If it had been sons, and here we're talking about homosexual gang rape, when the thing would have been to send out the sons, but he wouldn't have done that. The sons would have had a better priority. That's why he would send out the dollars. That's why he does send out his $2. Because basically women were property to be used whatever needed to be, how they need to be used. And the bottom line is this: you can always have more what?
More girls.
You can always have more dollars. That's the mentality. That's what the thinking was back then.
Some families have.
That's just who they were and everything, okay? But then we come, let's finish this next part of
Well,
it.
you also have to remember, Lot and his family didn't have any way to defend themselves from the mob.
Well, they didn't have any way to defend themselves, except they did have 2 angels in the corner.
He didn't know that.
But he didn't know that. We just don't think he knew that or anything. Well, like I said, he does try. Basically, the thing is to send them out, not even ask the mother what she thought. Basically, who is Lot still protecting?
The 2 men.
And himself. He's still just protecting himself as well. And if you notice something that I read, you'll notice that comes out even more later on, okay? The thing is, okay, well, it's already 6:30. So why don't we stop here? Because I want to pick up with that. Go back and reread, pick up verse 15, thinking about this, why he would do what he did. Not worried about his $2. That means he's not worried about his wife. So mainly he is more interested in doing what? In protecting the 2 men and himself. Go back and read again. Pick up verse 15 and read through the rest of the chapter and see what stands out to you in part of this when you're reading, okay? And we'll talk about it next week, all right? So thank you at home for being with us today. Like I said, we'll pick up with verses 15 and 16 next week. And until then, take care and God bless and goodbye.